Thank you very much for joining us on the CarbonX underscore TV channel. My name is N07, and this is the Perspective Podcast, Episode 2. We're going to be talking today about consistency and persistence with now, I think, a good friend of mine, Nova, on it's on that side. I got better from last time. He's over there. And today is going to be a pretty good episode, something that I know a lot about, and Nova especially knows a crap ton about. So I think we're just going to get right into it as usual and, have a little bit of fun as we like to do on this podcast and talk and banter a little bit as well. So Nova, if you just want to give a little bit of brief stint about yourself, I'm going to give you a couple seconds to do that just so everyone gets accustomed with who you are and what you do.
Yeah, for sure. My name is Nova. I'm currently opping in advanced for Valkyrie. I've been in the scene for a very long time. I've been playing since season 24. Um, Finally just qualified for advanced for my first time this past season. And yeah.
So yeah, obviously, we'll get a little bit more into your history in a little bit, and talking about consistency and persistence is definitely one thing you know a lot about, and I think we might get a little bit of a Twitter meme out of this podcast if all goes well. So just kind of getting into it, we know this podcast is supposed to be about mental health and supposed to be about the positive sides of being in esports and being around gaming, etc. And in my opinion, consistency is one of these things where if you have the drive and you have the motivation to do so, like a little bit we talked about last episode, it can really take you a long way. It is one of these situations where it's kind of like your kryptonite, but also can be that motivating factor and that drive that each player has to get better to reach that next level.
hmm
I mean, each tier of Counter Strike, in particular on ESCA, you have your Open, your IM, your Main, your Advanced, your Premier, all the way to Pro League. You know, there's going to be times where you hit that plateau where you just can't get past a division, or you're an individual player and you just either can't or you're team orientated and your team just can't get into that. Either you're 8-8 like it used to be, or you're 7-9 like it used to be. Maybe it's a little different now with there being less games,
hmm
or you make it to playoffs and you lose that first best of three, and all these situations can come into that factor. And it's really just about putting in the time, putting in the effort, and keeping that consistent grind up to make every opportunity the best opportunity you can make it. And that is just the most important thing. And I mean, you playing how many seasons in main, which I can't wait to shed light onto that statistic that I found out today. But
Yeah.
I mean, how many times did you make playoffs, or how many times did you go 8-8 before they made the change?
I think I ended up making playoffs 3 times, of main at least. Um, Once was in my like third season of main. My first 2 seasons I just joined some dead 6 and 8 teams to try to preserve the roster and whatever. But my first real season was playing with Atomic, Andrew,
Hmm.
Prince Tech, and Roko on at the time it's called Atomic's Goons. And that was my first actual playoff stint. We started up like 9-0 that season before falling to like a 9-7 record. Um, Coming into playoffs as like the second to bottom seed and just going out 2-0 from or 0-2 from there. Followed the same pattern in season 34 with Frida Boys, where we made playoffs, but we were the like second to last seed again, maybe third to last seed this time, and once again had to face one of the best teams in the division, drop to losers bracket, and then lose out 0-2. So this past time, my third time's a charm, as they say, because Valkyrie, went in with a much better seed, 24 seed going into it. We did drop our first game in an upset. Uh, that was a really well played game for Suki Squad, but we managed to rally it back and make it out. But in order to get to those playoffs, there were many seasons in between of 8-8, 7-9, the occasional 9-7. But yeah, it definitely took a lot of losing before those the benefit came through.
Yeah, and like as you said, just so taking all those individual seasons into an account, like was there ever any situation where you just felt like you needed to quit or you needed to take a step back? Because I mean, looking through your profile, it is team after team after team after team, sometimes 2 to 3 teams in a season where you just kept going, you kept pushing, even though some players might take some time off, might go, maybe I just need to work on my own game, take the rest of the season off, but you just kept going. Is
Hmm.
there a driving factor in your own mind or a driving factor that you think about every single time either you're dropped from a team where you just felt like you need to move on?
Yeah, so I definitely have played on a lot of teams. I would say I started veering towards the reputation of team hopper back in the day, not to the extent where that's like my identity or anything like that, but it was definitely getting there. And, it was unfortunate because from the outside, it definitely looks like, I might be doing that kind of thing. But in reality, oftentimes the teams would just die, or unfortunately, also I would get cut. Sometimes for more valid reasons than others, but it is a part of the life cycle you have in this game. And you're right in that a lot of people, when faced with these, roadblocks of getting cut mid-season or a team falling apart like right at the outset or even towards the end, that's enough for people to say, well, that's my season. I'm going to focus back up on myself and then come in the next season stronger. And I think that's an entirely valid, mindset. Just one that I've never really embraced. I want to be playing and getting this experience and continuing to learn and grow season by season, even game by game. I think a good example of that would be after falling out of advanced last season. I played 6 games with my team before getting removed from it. It wasn't necessarily like a bad performance wise. They had a friend they wanted to play with, and unfortunately, I was on the outs, so they decided to make that move to get that player on the roster in place of me, which I totally respect. But it left me in kind of a state of limbo where I wanted to find an advanced team, wasn't really getting many opportunities. Um, eventually ended up subbing for 2 games for at the time their Team Villainous Academy. Um,
Mhm.
and after that, after those 2 games stint ended, they didn't need me anymore. I didn't have an advanced team lined up. A lot of people were telling me to just take the rest of the season off. Don't drop back down to main. It's if you think it's below you, don't waste your time there. Don't join another team until it's an advanced team. So you have an advanced offer. And I considered that a lot, but coming into it, uh, I made the decision to go back down to main and to rifle instead of opping for the first time since season 32 or something along those lines. And I came in with a lot of confidence, thinking, okay, well, rifling, it's in main. I'm an advanced player. It should be easy, even if I've never rifled before. And I got a bit of a reality check real quick
Mhm.
because that was one of my weakest seasons as a player, and it taught me, if I'm really am ready for advanced at this point, and if I really am ready to kind of go for it, then I should be doing way better than I am right here. So it definitely, put my ego back in check a little bit, made me realize, okay, maybe one more season of main wouldn't be so bad. Maybe I'll be able to shape up into the player that I know I can be. And that's why I joined Valkyrie. And the story is written since then. And I'm back in advanced now as a much stronger player than I would have been had I taken a step back, in my opinion.
Right. So it was one of those situations where it was just 2 steps back to finally realize that the next step forward is maybe just a little bit different than what you would expect it to be at just a first glance.
Hmm.
And I mean, most players will probably struggle with that realization. I mean, me and
Hmm.
Colin talked last week about difference between team orientated and like self idolized players. And I mean, we have so many pro perspectives of this experience you have. I mean, just thinking of the main two, you have Simple kind of going to Liquid back in, I think, 2015. I think he
Hmm.
went where,
Around then.
it was a personal ideal with him being banned or just being unbanned and wanting to do the best for himself, which I mean, kind of worked, kind of didn't, give or take. And
Yeah.
on the other spectrum, you have Nico, who's now on G2, where he's been so team oriented that you could say it held his career back early on when he was with Mouth Sports, or even earlier where he was playing on Bosnian and Serbian based teams for like a couple seasons, which didn't make sense. And it's just kind of keeping that idealistic, the idealistic approach to everything that you do based on yourself, but also kind of being volatile to change and being volatile to make the choice for yourself that even if people don't agree with it, can help your own career or help a team's career or pretty much about anything. Just kind
Hmm.
of keeping that mentality about keeping going, keeping that consistency with doing everything, keeping up with the aim training, keeping up with the demo reviewing, keeping up with everything that you need to do in your day-to-day life. So then when, you take those 2 steps back, you're in a better position than when if you weren't doing these things, you just flop and you fail and people will laugh at you for whatever reason because you made a mistake. And
Hmm.
this is all just because you let your foot off the gas a little too much and you made a choice that later didn't work out. And I mean, if in any case, it's just sometimes it's unfortunate, sometimes it's not. I mean, I think, you gotta you could also say you got a little lucky, finding a team like Valkyrie that is willing to work and willing to give you, the opportunity that you got.
Absolutely.
I
Yeah.
mean, it's sometimes it just works that way, but I mean, you have a reputation in the scene of being this really consistent player, and you have this reputation. Maybe that team hopper quota is there, but people know you and people respect your name, and you're consistent. You put the stats up, you put the work in. That's gonna catch up to you. It's like, why would you be a bad person? Why would you be, not show up to practice, not do all the fundamentals that you need to do? So then, when you get an opportunity, it just falls through.
Yeah.
It's that just that obvious situation, which I mean, clearly worked out, and you're in advanced season, so you've got that 2 steps forward again. You're back to where you started, in a better position, purely
Much
off
better.
of all these things that have just kind of accumulated to one thing.
Yeah. I definitely think I ended up in a position where I can actually use these advanced games to continue to develop and actually have a shot at winning them. Compared to the last time I made advanced, we put together the roster maybe 3 days before the season began. Things were very shaky. There wasn't a lot of chemistry between the players, and we all we had really was hope that we would perform, but with nothing to back it up. And I think this time around, even with the less experienced players comparatively, because me and Raven are the only two that have advanced experience this time around, compared to a four advanced experience core on Aura Gaming. I think it's still for a much better uh, team environment and the scenario that we're going in here. We have a lot more potential to actually use our advanced spot rather than what ended up happening last time, where I got cut and then the team got relegated. Kind of a waste of time a little bit.
Right. And if like one of those situations ever happens, um, and what you either get cut or the team doesn't work out. Coming from your experience, since you have a lot more experience than I do, what is your kind of mental note, or what would you give to other players in your situation that might be going through the same thing, purely off of your own experience?
Yeah, sure. I think it's important to understand and really self-analyze why it is that you are in the position that you find yourself in. If you're getting cut from a team, it can happen for a lot of reasons, but in the end, it means that the other four or three players on your team decided that they would rather you not play with them. That's what it all boils down to in the end. But it's important to realize, what exactly it is that you can learn from it and what you have to just say, it sucks, but it didn't work out too. Because there's a lot of very valid reasons in the past that I've had for getting cut from teams. I would say my first big opportunity was I joined a team called like Weird Champ or something like that mid-season after getting cut from a not such a performing team. Uh, uh, I had joined into the 7-2 team. Um,
Mhm.
7-2 in Maine, the best record I had experienced up to that point. And I was opping. I had my role and everything, and I had a couple of like middling games, like 80-80R set of two games. We won both of them, but they decided that they weren't willing to invest any more time in me as a player. I guess they felt that there were some things lacking, and so they decided to cut me after our two wins when I was on the roster. And it would be very easy to look at it and say, "Wow, that was a rash decision from them," or maybe that I didn't necessarily deserve to get cut if I was staying up to standard individually and we were winning our games. But upon looking back at it and really, looking at the player that I was then versus the player that I am now, because of that experience, I was able to analyze a bunch of things that, really weren't up to snuff. They weren't up to my own standard as a player. I was making
Mhm.
mistakes that I wouldn't typically, and whether it was because of pressure or because of, like nerves, or maybe just built in things that I didn't have yet. You know, they accumulated to result in me not being good enough for this team at this time. That doesn't mean that I should give up. It doesn't mean that, I'm a bad player all around. It just means that I'm not quite there yet. And I think that as important as it is to realize when it is your fault and what it was, that happened, you can even reach out to your teammates and get a really good, sample of what it was that you did wrong because, it might be a little bit awkward. They just cut you from the team. But if you're really committed to learning and growing as a player, that
Hmm.
is a very valid way of doing that. Um,
Right. Yeah.
so I would say if you're in a position where you've just been cut, just know two things. One, I've been there probably more than anyone in this scene, and as long as you keep getting back up, like I mean, what are they gonna do? Nobody can kick you from the scene itself. Nobody can say you're no longer allowed to play CS. As long as you have the drive and the ability to get back up, you can keep playing. And there will be a team out there willing to give you a shot, and you
Hmm.
will be able to use that shot if you put in the work and the effort and reshape your name. I've put in a lot of effort on my own front to reshape my own name from, a hard stuck main player who doesn't deserve a chance, that's, been in main for 9 seasons without anything to show for it, to hopefully, a player that a lot more people kind of see depth in and understand, the road that it took. Maybe it took a little bit longer,
Hmm.
but all of this time that I've accumulated getting cut from teams, not making it to playoffs, you know, not putting up the highest numbers of all time, like has formed me into a player that now has all of this extra time than most other team or most other players in this division. And it will show this season. All of that effort that went into it,
Hmm.
all of the times that I got back up.
Right. And I mean, like, I'll kind of just like lay this stat on everybody now. I kind of wanted to wait until a big climax point. But when you talk about all this extra time, we are talking about 131 main matches in a single block,
Yeah.
with maybe two or three advanced games in between last season, which you talked about, before playing with Valkyrie this season. But that is more than probably most players have ever played in all of ESEA, like a majority. You're
Yeah.
probably in the top 1% for matches played, and they're all in one division within X amount of seasons.
Hmm.
And honestly, as anything Paz says in chat, it's demon mode on another level because it doesn't like it doesn't even show. I don't, in my opinion, just like a first glance of it, it probably doesn't even show the type of player that you are, because you know there's no there's no consistency in the teams, but there's consistency in the league, right? So there's no there's no consistency with what am I trying to say? There's no consistency with the team that you're playing with, but there's consistency in the performance and the level that you can play at, which which could mean a lot of things. There could be team issues or whatever could happen.
Hmm.
Things go wrong, life happens, whatever, right? But the fact that you're able to find another team and to find another team that's willing to give you that chance that you talked about is huge, because it just means that as we talked about earlier, like the reputation that you've gained and the reputation that you have of being this player, on your own side, and the players that actually know you, and the
Hmm.
players and the things that people are saying about you, because that's really important, is all positive, and it's all something that gives people, that want to play with you, that want to put the time in with you. And it's really important because when you talk about playing all these matches, these literally hundreds of matches, which is wild to say, right? It's just one of those things where, the persistence to keep going, which I mean is the next point, you know,
Hmm.
you pair the consistency with the persistence, it's almost unrivaled. It's one of those things where if you get the key balance between the two, that fine dance in between them both, which I believe you have, and I believe that you have the capability to keep going further with, it's just going to make everything so much easier. And I mean, we don't even have to talk about CS here, or we don't even have to talk about ECA. You could
Hmm.
put this in any relation to Counter Strike. You can put this into pugging. You know, you can say you're rank B or level 7 on Face It and you want to get to that level 10 rank A. You know, it's the same situation. Having that consistency to keep playing and to keep at the constant grind of doing what you need to do, but then also have that persistence to go, maybe I lost two or three in a row, but tomorrow when I come back and I've reflected on what I did wrong or what happened, I'm going to be a better player. I'm
Yeah.
going to be a better person, right? And it's that balance between the two and keeping that, as I wrote down on my notes is with persistence, which I mean we talked about a little bit before, is having that attitude of not giving an F
Hmm.
and always coming back. Creating that LFT post is one thing, but doing more than that, going into pugs and doing what you got to do, you know, understanding with that winner's mentality
Hmm.
is so crucial to keeping that fine balance between the two, which a lot of players struggle with, which I mean, I don't know if there's any other player. I mean, maybe Jackro. I know there was a couple when you made advanced. Jackro made a couple tweets about being the last standing main god or something.
The new Nova,
The new
yeah.
Nova, right? And it's just, it's very interesting to see how that kind of aspect goes, but it kind of proves that I mean there probably is more. There probably is
Hmm.
a ton of other players in the same situation as you two. But how many of these players have done it for as long and as consistent and as persistent probably isn't unrivaled, and it's kind of strange to see
Hmm.
because all these situations that happen, other players either make the wrong decision, either, as me and Colin said last episode, where you break that connection, you leave in a negative way, or you approach another team in a negative way, can all kind of break this whole thing down. And it's one of those situations which, you know, we need in the scene, I feel, we need more players that have that mentality of I'm going to keep going and I'm not going to give up because the best players will come out of that situation and it's just going to work that way.
Right.
Having players that want to play multiple seasons in a row and having players that want to keep going even if they lose, even if they get dropped and don't want to just, go play with friends, go have fun, which a lot of players I feel like probably do.
Yep. Yep.
It's just going to create a better scene overall and it's going to be more competitive. It's going to be, sure, you might see the same faces. I feel like with NACS in the current state, as of, October 2021, you know, everyone knows everyone,
Yeah.
especially when you get to main plus. It's very niche. It's very small with who knows who. And I mean, being that consistent player, being that persistent player that wants to keep going, other players are going to take notice. Other players are going to want to play with you more.
Hmm.
So if you really want it and you really want to get better and you really want to make that next division up, don't give up. Keep
Yeah.
doing what you need to do and you'll make it
Um,
eventually,
yeah,
hopefully.
speaking to that, uh, like I had a talk with my IGL bear yesterday night. Just, an hour-long conversation. We just like talk about CS sometimes. Um,
Right.
and one of the things that kind of came to me last night as I was working out in my head was like, I really feel like this past season, me and my team put in the work. Like we've did, in my opinion, everything we could have done to reach our goal, and then we reached it.
Mhm.
And that, really built in me like a lot of confidence that when you actually kind of do what you're supposed to and what you know you can do, and hold yourself to a specific standard and keep going, that it actually, will work. I've been in a lot of positions in the past where, whether because of myself as an individual or the team that I was with, maybe we didn't put every ounce of what we could into a season. And then the season ends and I go 8-8 and, I have to make another LFT post because I got cut or because the team died. And I'm sitting there like, okay, when is it my turn? When do I get to make advanced?
Mhm.
Why is that not this season? I feel like I gave everything I could, and I'm sitting here still in Maine, without a team or anything to show for it. But when you actually go in and analyze, or at least when I did, and I introspected on all those past seasons when I said that I was doing everything in my power and I was, giving it my all. I really do think that there was still a lot that I could have done that I do today and over this past season that I hadn't done in the past. I realized that after this last season, I'm tired of sitting around and waiting and letting other people pass me by or telling myself that I was doing everything that I possibly could when I really wasn't, or not self-analyzing enough, or not realizing, even if it's just that day in the server just having an off game, like there's a lot of like factors that you have to constantly be managing that, maybe I was slacking on certain parts in the past, telling myself that everything was fine and that I was doing everything I could, but really wasn't. And I feel like this season was the first time when I actually feel like I contributed everything that I could and worked with my team, and my team fortunately mirrored that
Mhm.
and bounced it back at me, and we all worked together towards that goal, and it worked. And so that's why, from this season onward, especially, it was about a halfway point through the season when I made that realization and really started kicking it into high gear. And I think it's actually like even like noticeable in the stats page if you want to look
Right.
at that. But like
Mhm.
even in general, just you know, once that switch flipped, it was like a different player and a different experience. And I feel like I grew like so much more just over this season than in general. And that none of
Mhm.
that would have happened had I just, continued to be complacent and, be happy with the fact that, I was getting like number one op in the division, or like, uh X number of seasons under my belt. It doesn't matter if you have like 100 seasons of main if you're not doing anything with them.
Mhm.
What matters is how can you continue to develop, because if you really belong in the division, you would be there.
Right.
Luck does play a factor for sure. I've gotten my fair share of unlucky breaks in the past, with a lot of teams. Um, uh, Actually, speaking of Jacker, one thing that he said to me the other day was that, you know, I am one of the biggest victims of NA CS:GO. Like for some reason, like the NA of NA CS:GO just hits me like a truck every time I don't expect it. Whether
Right.
that be being cut from teams at random, or,
Mhm.
like like one spot away from playoffs, whatever it is. And
Mhm.
uh, in times like that, I like to remember, like my dad once told me, in response to like me getting cut from another team or something along those lines. He said, you know, what for other people would be a mountain, for you is a hill. English isn't his
Right.
first language, but he tried his best, and I think the
Mhm.
message got across that, like,
Yeah.
as long as you kind of continue to persist and to
Mhm.
persevere, um whatever the big massive problem is that you're facing, teamlessness, or you know whatever, like even like bigger situations than that, you can come overcome them if you just realize that it's one step at a time. That mountain
Mhm.
will shrink right in front of your eyes, and then you'll be staring down the barrel of an advanced season that you just earned with your team in no time. So,
Yeah, and I believe like that mentality of, I mean, especially in CS, you have that, one round at a time, one gunfight at a time. That mentality can take you so far and can help you achieve so many different things because you break it all down. You get each individual problem and you attack it rather than take the whole problem and the whole situation where you're attacking just, you basically poking, as you said, you're walking up a mountain rather than walking up little hills.
hmm
You're basically attacking the problem just in ways that is more efficient and ways that is probably more beneficial than most people would realize. You know, if you're an open team, I feel like the way that it's formatted is that you're supposed to go open IM main advanced whatever, right?
hmm
But a lot of people, like, obviously the way that it's formatted is you can skip divisions and you can do all this crazy stuff. And I mean, it used to work a lot differently if you remember, where you would have the winners of open going to premier.
yep,
And like that is the most bizarre thing ever. I could do a whole episode on ESCA and rule changes and all that kind of crazy stuff because it doesn't make sense and it's funny, and
yeah,
it kind of just throws out this whole mindset and this whole psychological concept of consistency and persistence when you allow teams to just skip everything. And
yep,
sure, beating out probably like 254 teams or whatever it was in playoffs for that to happen. It's like even if you do that, it doesn't make sense and you skip out on a majority of the, the grind and the aspect that you would need. You have,
Yeah.
I mean, now it's different with how it all works, and you have, I believe ESA does invites now to advanced if you are like above a certain level. Like I know Godsent got the invitation last year
Yeah, they're
or
very
last season.
stingy with those, but
Mm-hmm.
it definitely is something that exists, it is
Right.
available. But as far as, real quick, just as far as like what you're saying regarding, you know, a set process that could be followed theoretically versus like, sorry, there's a
Oh, you're
something going
good.
on outside, but as far as like this process, this like OpenIM main advanced Premiere
Mm-hmm.
Pro like circuit that you have to like kind of go through. I feel like it's important to both realize that like some people will be able to, get the benefit of skipping
Mm-hmm.
through, and that some
Right.
people won't. Some people will have to work through open 100 seasons in a row before they
Mm-hmm.
make IM, and some people will play one season of open and make advanced. You know,
Right.
I know a lot of my friends, like I know a lot of people that I've played with over the past, however many seasons that I've played the game, where I've stared at them, making Premiere like 2 seasons ago already when we were in the same IM team just very recently. And, you
Mm-hmm.
know, thinking like, well, damn, like they really took advantage of, everything that they could. Maybe it's a
Right.
connection that got them on that team. I think there was a player named like Eric or something like that who was able to skip from like open to IM to advanced to Premiere or something along those lines. I can't remember the exact road that he took, but
Right.
people like have their ways of kind of snaking up the chain a little bit
Mm-hmm.
faster than perhaps is intended, but that just means that those players went a different route, but it doesn't
Right.
cheapen the player that's been in open for 3 or 4 seasons and is going into their fifth and is thinking to themselves, well, I could compete in main, why am I not in main yet, probably
Right.
trying to get tryouts or whatever, but not having the experience to back up that claim,
Mm-hmm.
and sitting there like, well, why isn't this working? This guy gets to hop all the way up to advanced or whatever. You know, I can see that mentality very easily infecting like genuinely good players and
Mm-hmm.
preventing them from continuing and then going the route like you said, where they end up just fading into teams of friends and open playing for
Mm-hmm.
fun and not really pursuing the extent of what their potential really had to offer. But to that, I would say, it's exactly what I said before with approaching it one step at a time, realizing that people will have different routes to get there. There's going to be 15-year-old prodigies that hop through the divisions like nothing and are, facing you down in Premier when it took you
Mm-hmm.
800 years to get there. I mean, even just for me, like I'm approaching 10,000 hours in this game right now. I started playing when I was, I think, 12 or 13. I'm 19 now.
Mm-hmm.
And I definitely have a lot more time than a lot of the people that I see around. And just to get to silver 3 from silver 2 took me 3,000 hours. Like that's
Right.
ridiculous. Most people that play at the level that I play at, it came a lot quicker. Maybe they have 3,000 hours. I think my team, like the most hours on my team besides myself is probably like 3 or 4 or 5,000, and I'm sitting here with double that in the exact same position that they ended up in.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very easy to be negative about it and say like, okay, well, they only took that long and I'm sitting here in the same position as them. I must have wasted all that time in the past. um but so we wait for the ambulance to go by
No,
real
that's
quick.
good. I mean, there's
um
no problem with it.
but yeah, it's easy to think, that you wasted all that time down there. But for me, I mean, at least I had come in
Mm-hmm.
from zero FPS experience, zero experience with a mouse and keyboard, playing on a shitty laptop, playing with a trackpad in CS, like at first when I first started, all of these different factors that came in, I like to say when people ask me like, okay, well, were you like a natural, like prodigy kind of player where everything kind of just clicked and it only took you this long just because you were messing around or like, what idle hours or whatever it is, and now you're just
Mm-hmm.
taking it seriously? Or are you more the player that had to work for it? And I really do think that I'm like really had to work hard to make up for the lack of talent that I had, because I would say the only natural talent that I have that actually like affects CS would be my reaction time. But if you take that away, like
Mm-hmm.
it's really everything that I have, I had to work for. So I think that's why it might appear that it took, much longer for some people. but some people just have to play thousands of hours just to get the basics that other people have. But
Hmm.
again, doesn't cheapen anyone's, experience in either end of it. Some people just are naturally gifted and can use that to propel themselves further. But if they don't put the work behind it, they're going to end up falling behind the player who was learning how to use a mouse and keyboard for 3,000 hours, but is now in advance above them.
Right, and I think there's that psychological concept which is usually not talked about a lot, but it is based on how fast you learn things. I don't know the name of it, and I honestly should. But there's a very good concept of putting in the time and putting in so much effort into something, but then understanding that no matter how much time you put into something, and no matter how much you are, how much you how much you win, how much you lose, how much, all these things accumulate. As you said, you approaching 10,000 hours. I'm personally approaching 9,000 hours. I think we started playing on the same time since we're about the same age. But it's, finding these young players that, either just have a natural aptitude or just are more bound with this concept. I'll find it later. Um,
Mhm.
but basically they just learn so quickly and they learn at a different pace. So, when you're developing in silver, like myself, it took me probably around 3 to 4,000 hours to reach gold Nova 1.
Yeah.
And, that was like no idle hours or whatever. And it's like learning the game then is completely different to learning the game now, which could be a whole different topic. But, CS has changed and the game's changed and all that. But, getting these players that, are young, I think just off the top of my head, a couple young players. You have the what's the Rectify Academy? What was
Calyx?
Calyx?
Oh,
Calyx
wait.
was
Well, he's on
he,
Rectify.
he
Was on Rectify,
was
but yeah, yeah.
he was right. You have Calyx. You have
Who else? Young
Gavin from
players.
Halfless.
Gavin, yeah,
Yep. And you have players like that just to name drop two of them. But it's like you have
yeah.
players like that they're really young and have that natural aptitude. Probably haven't you know they've been playing on mouse and keyboard probably for a lot longer than a lot of people have realized. Um, that's that whole situation where, like, you said you started on a trackpad. Like, I started on a controller. I was playing Call of Duty Modern Warfare 1 far before I was playing CS:GO.
Right.
And, it's that transition that a lot of people don't realize is really important to a lot of players. I know Gavin personally. I don't know Calyx, but I know playing games beforehand, and I can name one of my teammates for this from the Davenport Ultra team. But one of our players played Rainbow Six for the school before he played last year, and then transitioned last year, and he only has around 2,500 hours.
Mhm.
But he's a really good player because in that situation, all he has to learn is the game sense.
Mhm.
All he has to learn is how to play the game, and he's played in a team-orientated setting for 2,500 hours, rather than when most players start, they're playing solo queue or they're playing with friends, not seriously in pugs or in matchmaking for those first 1,000 hours.
Mhm.
And having basically, as you're saying, that people have a different approach and how they can climb the ladders quicker, but it really just stems on where you come from, and it really
Yeah.
just stems from what you know beforehand. So it's like players like, me and you, for example, since we're pretty much in the same boat of playing different things and playing on, not as an advantageous position and playing the game and learning the game by yourself or maybe, via like a War Owl video, back in like 2015 or whatever.
Yeah.
It's like these players now that are playing have been playing FPS games forever with
Yeah.
the rise. I mean, even in the last 5 or 6 years, you had Call of Duty come to PC. You had Fortnite come out. You had the birth of battle royales that really went crazy. Like all these different things that accumulate over time. The consistent upward trajectory that not a lot of people realize in just gaming and technology as a whole has changed entirely how this perception of young players has come about. That's
Yeah.
why if you look back in the day when CS first came out, the first young player, the really young player to probably come into the scene that hit a tier, like that hit a pro league level, I wouldn't know who it is, but it wasn't for a couple years. it wasn't probably until 2016, I would say. Just off the top of my head, I want to say Som
Mm.
was like the first like young player that when he signed as like a streamer slash player for Complexity, I believe. Like I
Yeah.
think that was like the first time like somebody under the Pro League like age requirement or like the ESL or I don't know who set one, but
Oboe also.
Obo also. Oh
Yeah.
yeah, Obo also. It was like one of those players where they couldn't play in Pro League but were really young, you know. Um, they probably had previous FPS knowledge that where it works out. I think a good example for this would probably be Shroud,
Hmm.
just off of like his past, where with his dad and playing computer games, being around that atmosphere for such a from such a young age, kind of doesn't bypass, but gives you that accelerated growth of instead of having to learn how to macro and micro, you're more of just learning how to micro, and it changes that situation entirely.
Yeah, I mean the importance of mentorship it also
Mhm.
is like really massive. I was once told by one of my old IGLs, MST, that he's spent a couple seasons just dedicated to making me a better player, for which I'm very appreciative. I actually just beat him in the deciding match for advanced.
The
He was on
student
Rectify
beats the
Academy.
master.
Yeah, exactly. But I really appreciate all the time that MST gave towards me and making me a better player. But he had essentially said one thing that stuck with me, which was, had I fallen into a mentor 8 or 9 seasons prior, I could be staring at Premier right now.
Hmm.
But because it took so many teams where I had to essentially, like, I don't think I actually did anything other than teaching myself and trying to just fight to survive in some of my teams until like falling into MST. But by then it was already, I was already like 17 by
Hmm.
then, or even 18 by then. So any benefits that could have been developing and building throughout all this time were just wasted on me fending for myself. And there's a lot that you can do to teach yourself and grow, but having a mentor, someone like really smart to guide you, like, it's just, you're just essentially like, it's just a waste. It's not as though I wasn't like reaching out to people and stuff like
Hmm.
that, but having someone on your team dedicating time to you, or like realizing like this guy is talented, like really talented considering where he is in the scene, we like this needs to be developed. Like, I know a lot of
Right.
players fall into that. Gavin's in a really good environment for that right now. I would say Calix,
Hmm.
has definitely had players around him to develop that talent. And all it takes is one person to realize that and to reach out and to give him a chance, and
Hmm.
that astronomically boosts where people can end up. So, you know, shout out to all like the boomers in the scene who are like guiding people up further than maybe they were able to make it. But it's really important, because there's players like those players like Gavin, um Calix, and all these players with a lot of talent could have been wasted a lot easier had they ended up in a situation like mine, fighting
Hmm.
for themselves, getting kicked every other week, not really a good environment for consistency. Like you were
Hmm.
talking about earlier as well, like you said, how every team I've essentially been on like a million different teams, right? And
Hmm.
the one thing that was consistent was me, but all these factors outside of it were changing. I think I
Hmm.
moved like 3 or 4 times in one season, like switching team by team by team. This is going to be like my first season where we're keeping the same five I've ever had,
Right.
like actually ever. There's always been at least one roster change or one like switch up. So I'm very, very excited and curious to see how that affects my play, because I would say that I peaked on Valk by the very end of it, which just
Hmm.
implies to me that like if I'm like peaking in our last playoff match before we got knocked out, there's nothing to stop that progress from continuing to go higher and higher and higher
Yeah.
as this advanced season plays out. Now that I
Hmm.
have consistency, the knowledge that I'm not going to get cut, or I'm not going to get, I don't need to fight for my spot anymore. I can
Hmm.
play for myself, for the team, do whatever needs to be done with the safety of knowing that like I'm here, like I don't need to worry about
Right.
finding a new team or anything like that. And I think that's also a really big factor in young players coming up. Like, it's the sooner you like find that safety. that safety net, like that nest that
Hmm.
you can just develop and grow in, the better.
Yeah, it's like trying to find for young players especially is trying to find that environment where when you're in that, state of, I mean, when you're younger, I'm pretty sure, um, you learn so much faster and you retain information so much faster and way more efficient than, when you're late teens, approaching that lack of brain development by the time you turn 25. So the earlier you get started and the earlier you find that environment that Nova was talking about is the more time you get in that, the more time that you get, the more consistency you get in a positive and the more positive environment and the environment that you learn the most and the environment that you're supported by other people and other players, you're going to develop into a much better player than if you are an aim star just working your way through pugs and working your way from team to team to team every season. That maybe is an unfortunate situation for some people, but can be a fantastic learning experience for many other people. And I
Hmm.
mean, I don't know about you, but like I think with the way that NACS is now, viewing your career so far, anyway, um, is something that many young players should look at. You
Hmm.
know, you have, I think it might work a little differently, but you have players like Robs, that's on Mouse Sports now, that I'm pretty sure his ESCA page is like the funniest looking thing because it's literally like a season or two of Open or like a season of Open then IM and then it's Premiere with Mouse Sports.
Hmm.
I'm pretty sure that's the way it looks and it's that exact situation that we're talking about.
Yeah, it's main playoffs, pro, 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 pro.
Right.
Yeah.
So it is one of those situations where it is just the craziest looking thing, but you know that he got in the environment that we're talking about. He was good enough individually and he was a good kid and obviously with the whole possibly cheating thing it might have been a little different, but him being individually skilled and him being individually uh like being prospective enough to get into that environment, to push himself into that environment. I mean, obviously he pushed himself into an environment that people dream of.
Right.
I believe he joined that team when Oscar and what's his name? Chris J. So
Hmm.
he had veterans in the team that are creating that environment that we're talking about. You
Yep.
know, obviously now it's a little different. He's the more developed player in his team, I would say so. Being
Yeah.
surrounded by these other young guns with Dexter kind of leading the charge, but being under that team and then with Kerrigan especially, I would say he probably gained the most experience because that guy is crazy with creating young players into whatever. But keeping that consistency and keeping that persistence and trying to find that team and trying to find that environment that you desire for is one of either the hardest journey is finding that positive environment or could be the easiest thing just because you are really good or you are especially with NA as it is right now, or with CS as it is in general across the world, is if you are one of those players that is really good and you can challenge for, FPL, FPLC, or in these smaller tournaments, you're doing the work outside of the team and you're doing the individual stuff to where you don't have to worry about it as much. So when you get into this environment and when you get into you know, this team where you can develop the most is you have the skills to back it up so you can focus more on the other stuff.
Right.
And it's just about, as we said earlier about with the mountain, it's getting the little hills so the big mountain doesn't look as big.
Yep.
It's keeping that consistency of doing all the little things and getting the persistence to keep doing it no matter what. So when you find yourself at the top of the mountain in the best possible position for yourself, you're not climbing the mountain anymore. The mountain is growing underneath you,
Hmm.
which I mean that's kind of a quote in itself. But you know, going back to kind of the the concept of the whole thing that we're talking about here
Hmm.
is, getting the consistency with the team and getting the persistence to find that team is really important. and I'm kind of going what anything goes on in chat here because I feel like it's a really good point. Is just because you are putting in the work as a team doesn't mean you're putting in the work, and doesn't mean you're slacking on the work individually. Is grinding on your own, grinding on your own time and doing all the things to kind of polish your own skills can be really important to helping your own personal uh, goals and whatever you want to do as well. Just
Right.
because of as you are probably accustomed to, is that unfortunate circumstance can happen, and you need to be able to pick yourself back up.
Yep.
But I'm kind of just reading what he says in chat real quick, just because it's actually something good to read. I like reading in the middle of just talking because it helps me think. I'm gonna do it probably every episode after this. It helps me a little bit. Um, but yeah, I mean, you're especially right with the investing in yourself and investing in the team. Finding that balance. I think me and Colin talked about it last week. Um, getting that difference between um, being a team player and like a selfish player. We use that kind of terminology,
Hmm.
but you know, doing everything that you need to do. Um, you know, it'll eventually work out or it won't. It really just depends on the environment you put yourself in.
Right.
And I mean, as we talked a little bit before this, you are obviously now with Valk going into advanced, and I know um, you've played with teams like Revel on LAN, and you've played with a ton of different players. And I know you mentioned Valk, Revel, and I just put it down as FB because I completely forgot what you said. But
For the
like
boys, yeah.
Bird Boys, those like there are all these different environments and all these different teams. Like even the separation between online and in person. You
Yep.
know, is there a difference? Is there kind of a statement that you would make for players that are wanting to get better and players that are trying to find this environment that we're talking about? Do you think that going to LAN and being persistent and doing everything that you need to do, which includes going to LAN if you really want to make it, do you think that's a vital thing that is now going to be reintroduced, hopefully more often since 20 since the COVID 19 stuff has been lifted?
Yeah, I had like a very long conversation with my team and individuals on my team about the importance of land. I really do think with how much opportunity there is, like, with the circuit being made and everything coming back, like going to
Hmm.
land is like just a very easy way to get better. I mean, I went to 3 lands over the course of maybe even 4 lands over the course of the past few months, between Denver, visiting Philly, even though I didn't play the first one, playing the Frag main event, um, and playing the Long Island. And I feel like every time I came back from a land, my teammates noticed that I had gotten better, and they would say like, "Wow, the land buff." Everyone jokes about the land buff, but the land buff is that you're surrounding yourself, or at least ideally, is that you're
Hmm.
surrounding yourself by players or with players that are varying levels better than you, or even on the same level as you,
Right.
but with a different approach. And just being a sponge and absorbing everything you possibly can will get you to a higher level. So if you can go, just as an individual, even because I've only
Hmm.
ever really been to a land with my full five like twice, and that's not with
Right.
Valkyrie. And both times I got kicked immediately after, so I didn't really get to reap the
Hmm.
benefits of it. But um, being able to just even go as an individual, you will see improvement if you want there to be improvement. Like if you
Right.
are a sponge and you absorb everything from all these people. I mean, I sat with Heretic for like, I don't know, like 30 minutes in between one of our matches, and he just showed me his perspective towards opping. For that, I'm
Hmm.
appreciative of that as well. So as long as you really want to, you can gain so much from LAN. As long as you like, continue to see improvement online as well. Like right now, I think it's still a little bit of a balance. Like you can't just do LAN or you can't just do online if you want
Hmm.
to succeed. Unfortunately, my team is, struggling a little bit to be able to get ourselves out to a LAN as a five. But I think if we can ever get that going, we'll be able to see massive improvement within ourselves as well. But for now, going with as many people as I can, trying to play under, a bunch of different mixes and learn different
Hmm.
perspectives of the game, that will help you a lot, as a developing player.
Yeah, and especially with the changes with, as you mentioned, with the circuit coming back from, I believe it's NSG, with them introducing a circuit again, if you are close to a LAN, or if you are in, if you're a young player, or you're maybe you can drive is what I'm kind of getting at. If you can drive, or you can get someone to drive you somewhere, even attending a LAN as as you mentioned, you went to the first Philly as just a viewer, just
Yep.
going to a LAN and talking to people, and maybe they know who you are, maybe they don't. It's, that situation that you really just go and meet people, and you really go and learn, even if you're not playing. Creating that environment starts outside the server for most people, whether that's online in Discord, whether that's whatever. Um, Too poor for Lansage.
Yeah.
Man, it feels bad. But all those things kind of accumulate in one big ecosystem that not a lot of people will probably realize. And it could work in so many different ways that players either reap the benefits of it, or they don't. And the good players and the players that want to get better and truly want to get better will go to the lands if they can, right? If obviously if circumstances like money or whatever doesn't allow it, But if you have a free weekend, you don't do anything on the weekends, and you are an hour to 2 hours away from a LAN, it is probably worth the drive.
Yep.
I guarantee it's worth the drive at that point.
Yeah.
I only have a couple lands under my belt. I mean, I've played in a couple, and that's another thing we can get into in a minute is college and collegiate and how that's kind of advancing that situation.
Mhm.
Um, but all these different things that can kind of coalesce into one big factor, you
Yeah.
know, can be such a jarring factor that not a lot of people take advantage of, and I feel has kind of, well, has definitely succeeded because of COVID-19, but the mentality behind it, because if you aren't a tier 1 pro, you aren't going to land kind of attitude, um, needs to come back if this mentality is positive enough. And I think NSG is doing something really good by having all these different smaller lands kind of scattered across the country,
Yep.
and then them accumulating into this large land that, is as big as Frag was and
Yeah.
as important as Frag was for the scene, because it improves just everything. The viewer base was there, the camaraderie between people, not just players, but as people was there. Um, Obviously I didn't get to go to any of the frags just with how like moving and stuff, because I live pretty close to the Oceanside land in California, but it was the same weekend as moving to Michigan.
Right.
So I got a little bit unfortunate with that, but I still, even when a lens happens, I'm still, on Snapchat messaging Colin and Spencer and, Slow Motion and like all those guys from the varsity team that went to the main frag. I was messaging all that. I was messaging Graham, the director, and Chris, the coach, and trying to keep intact with everything and just see how it goes. And it is one of those things where, you know, just seeing it and seeing how it affected the team and seeing how everything happened all together makes me a player that wants to get better and a player that wants to work towards, working with the team to get it to a higher division, makes you want to go to land so much more.
Yeah.
And if you want to get better and if you want to succeed, you know, the mentality is there and it's obvious. And if you don't have it, you don't have it. It's simple as that. So,
Yep.
I mean, um, as I mentioned, playing for the second team at Davenport, and being surrounded by the team that is now the winners of season 39 main, woo, or season 38, woo. Um, you know, Obviously being there when they won and watching that best of five technically,
Yeah.
kind of go about, um, it really changed my perspective, and changed everything that I kind of viewed about collegiate esports as a whole, because I personally reap from the benefits of being on LAN with the people that I play with and playing these matches in person, whether that's 4 or 5 of us with a coach. It
Right.
makes such a difference. And I kind of wanted to ask, because I'm not as in tune with every other school as I would like to be, but obviously you do attend Drexel. Is it Drexel University or Drexel College?
University.
Drexel University. So you do attend there, and you do have some pretty experienced players on your team, and you do have a good record, obviously, 4-1.
Hmm.
Hoping to push for playoffs, I assume.
Yep.
And I don't remember the top of my head, but for the the meme poll as I call it, the coaches poll, I know you have been viewed in the top 10 quite
Yeah,
often.
I think we were in it once as like maybe like eighth or ninth, and then we
Right.
fell out of it again.
hmm
Uh,
So if that's
it's
the
not
case,
successful.
right. Um, but do you have a LAN like area? Do you have like a lab as we have?
So yeah, Drexel doesn't really have any benefit. Like unfortunately, like just
hmm
as the way our school goes, I think the best we could possibly get would be if we went as a full five, like our collegiate roster of myself, David, Sticks, Febreze, and Genk. If all five of us decided to go to a land together as a college, they might be willing to pay for like travel and maybe like some expenses, but
Right.
we definitely don't have anything near to the level of Davenport or of MTU or any of these schools that actually, really support it, which is a little bit unfortunate, but
hmm
fortunately for us, like what we are missing in support and genuine like collegiate CS like structure behind us, where we make up for in the fact that we have, an entire main and above roster with three main players, one of which has
hmm
advanced experience, an advanced player, and a premier player, so
Right.
um, i it's not ideal, but you know, we're all good friends
hmm
and we play pretty well together, so it's all right.
Right. And do you feel like if a situation arises, this is kind of a hypothetical I want you to think about, just
Hmm.
because um our program was in a little bit of a similar situation with Kojo Mo, with
Hmm.
Valkyrie as well, a couple of seasons prior. Um, if a situation arises where Drexel kind of supports the program and you get backing, maybe it's scholarship or a lab or whatever. Do you see the the benefits being enough to where you bring the five together and you play together and you kind of do everything like I mean at Davenport there is this kind of notion is everything together.
Hmm.
That's how a team improves and we're all friends outside the game where we all hang out outside the game. We're all together in person. And it definitely makes a difference obviously with the varsity team winning main. It proves that I mean good players obviously are good players and the benefits of you know working together and being together are there. But do you think that that quote unquote land buff that you talk about is enough in your eyes that if your team wants to get better and your team wants to take it seriously and you have the backing to do so, would there be that possibility for you or even other colleges if they're considering it?
So yeah, so the interesting thing about at least with my roster is that the Drexel team, I think Genk is a little bit newer. Like he's a great guy and everything like that, but
hmm
he is like just joined the our team this season, so we know him a little bit less. But between the other four of us, between myself, David, Sticks, and Febreze, I mean, we've been playing and friends for like a couple years now, really, since me and Febreze came into the school at the same year, and the other two are 1 year above us. Um, we're really good friends, and we all, like I said, we played good CS together. I would say, unfortunately, I don't really see a Drexel CS project like the Davenport CS project happening
hmm
because of role conflicts. Now, I know that there were role conflicts on the Davenport team as well,
hmm
but there's we have two players on the Drexel roster between myself and our opper David, where I'm sure you just heard the hint there, our opera David,
Right,
where there is a bit of contention over the role, and unfortunately, I'm not willing to give up, opping for myself, and he is not willing to give up opping either. So
right,
as it stands in collegiate right now, we split it on a map by map basis, but you obviously you
right.
can't really follow the same formula in league,
There's no consistency there.
Yeah,
So it
exactly,
wouldn't work on a every single game, every single practice kind of basis unless
exactly.
you changed it up. Right.
Someone would have to drop it, and I fully respect David not wanting to in the same way that I'm sure he respects me not wanting to. He has seniority, which is, even though I'm in a higher division, he also is the opera of the other three of my teammates' actual team. So it
hmm
makes sense for him to have a little bit more priority there.
Right.
And as much as I would love, love, love for a Drexel team to actually happen and to be able to play and like, even if it meant going back down to Maine or whatever with their roster, I would be open to it if that one
Mhm.
little conflict could be resolved. I don't know. I can't speak for Gank because he is in a playoff premier team right now.
Who does
So
he
of
play for
course,
again?
he plays for One Tap.
One tap. Okay, right.
Yeah. So their playoff premier team is very uh solid and established player. So I really wouldn't blame him if he didn't want to drop down into that kind of project. Of course, some players are not like Spencer and Colin, where
Mhm.
and even Arcade, where they're able to like drop down a little bit, but um I would be open to it in the event that
Right.
that role conflict could be resolved, but I just don't think that it's possible. Even if we
Mhm.
had the backing and a lab and everything, I guess we'd have to have a serious talk about that. But as it
Right.
currently stands, those three do get to play with each other in Maine on all gas, no breaks, and then me and
Mhm.
Gank are a little bit more separate, but you know, yeah,
Which I mean is still a positive because you have that core playing together outside of the game, so they always play together, and then you have two players that yes are in a higher division, but may not have the same chemistry with each other, and I feel like that could equal out in some sense. I know, obviously, Premier uh, playoffs is like a huge deal, and you have to definitely be an outstanding player to be in that situation. So I wouldn't hold it against you guys, and I wouldn't, unless you got some serious backing, as you said, to where there would need to be a conversation.
right,
There really probably wouldn't be too much issue because if I mean, if you're 4-1 now, I don't know who you've played. I haven't looked at all that, but you're playing well and you're doing what you need to do to win. Obviously your one loss is a forfeit loss,
yeah,
so there's a contention where you are 5-0. So I mean, if it ain't broke, don't fix it kind of situation. But then I mean, it's all just personal for you guys, so there's really no problem with that.
right,
If you don't see the need to play together or to create a Drexel CS:GO project like the Davenport, the MTU, and then a couple other schools,
yeah,
etc. So it's just like you know there could be a whole Uno reverse card on this whole podcast about consistency and persistence, but we're not gonna go into it.
hmm
Um, but yeah, I mean keep doing what you're doing. I mean there's no problem with that, and I mean you're only on the up from here,
yep,
and you have the backing to do so.
hmm
You have the mentality to do so, and I think especially coming from my experience, which is not as much as yours, but players like you is the mentors that we need because even though you're 19, it isn't young in esports terms. It's still young in life and still young in everything that you could possibly do. You
hmm
know, even just being like a business owner or being a teacher or whatever. People will view you and people will view about anyone that has this kind of mentality and has the same drive or whatever to kind of keep this consistency and persistence with everything that they do. It's only a positive. It's
right,
only that the mentality is something that everyone should strive for and something that everyone should kind of do in and out of each other.
right.
And
I agree.
yeah, I mean it's kind of just simple as that. And I think we're gonna wrap it up pretty much here. Pretty sure we covered everything that I had written down, so I can't really just ramble on forever. So if you just want to say a kind of final note, see where people can find you, or if people want to watch your advanced games as you strive for playoffs, I mean, just plug it all in here. I have full control. Werewolf can't tell me no.
Yeah. So, as far as my individual, it says it right there, I think it should be.
It's over
This way,
that way.
right
Yep.
here.
Mhm. Of
It's reverse, of course.
course
Um,
it is.
Nova underscore FPS. That's two underscores. Post a lot of great content, power rankings, my own, road through divisions and stuff. Um, Valkyrie, very fortunate to have such a great org. They do stream all of our matches, Valkyrie LLC. But all of that information it's found on my Twitter anyway. So I feel like that's the easiest way to keep up with everything. Really expecting a lot this season. A lot of great stuff coming from my team. we're putting in the work, and I'm really excited to show it on a little bit larger of a scale than we had in Maine. I mean, we were hitting a lot of viewers even in Maine. So now that we're in advance, moving forward, I'm excited to continue to share what we work we put in on a broader scale. But yeah, really appreciate you having me on and listening to my ramblings for a little bit here.
Hell yeah, man, anytime.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
so I mean, good luck to you in advance.
Thank you.
I see you guys definitely pushing for playoffs. If you put in that work, you put in that grind, I believe you guys can definitely do it. And
Mhm.
I wish every other team that has a couple new players, hopefully they don't run into you and run into your five stacks. But other than that, I just wanted to thank everyone for coming. I wanted to thank everyone in chat for talking and giving us a little bit of reverb. I definitely liked it. I definitely am going to do it every single episode after this because I definitely like you know even just working off other people is definitely something a podcast should do more. Um, unless you're talking to the president or God or something. You can really just have a one-on-one with them. But thank you very much for watching. Um, this is a perspective podcast. If you want to rewatch this or you want to do whatever with this, it'll be uploaded on YouTube probably tomorrow around the same time. My name is NO7. My Twitter is here if you want to follow me or whatever. Um, every episode will be streamed at 5 p.m. every Tuesday with one handsome guest like Nova himself. Or next week, um, we'll figure it out. We'll get there. Week by week basis. Am I right? So I just want to thank you all again for coming to watch. Um, if you want, drop a follow on the CarbonX TV, CarbonX_TV channel, so you don't miss another episode every Tuesday. And believe it's just CarbonX on YouTube. If you want to subscribe over there to catch an episode whenever it goes live. If you want to rewatch it, share it on Twitter. Get an episode to 100 views. Be kind of dope. Million views if you want to be optimistic. But yeah, I'm pretty sure that's everything. And we'll see you next week.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.